to record. Okay, first I want to give you a kind of an outline and overview and of the book for the study tonight. Okay, and that will help us. Okay. Okay, Exodus chapter 11, verse 1 to 13, verse 16. The night that God made a way. There are four main sections. Section 1, God's final warning, Exodus chapter 11, verse 1 to 10. Here God tells Moses of one last plague that he will inflict upon Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And verse 4 to 8, announcing the death of the firstborn. However, Pharaoh's heart remains very hard. The lesson that we think to learn, the point and the takeaway is God's justice and God's sovereignty. Okay. Then chapter 12, chapter 11, only 11 verses. Chapter 12, verse 1 to 30, much longer. The unblemished lamb, blood on the doorpost, instructions for the Passover. The people obey in faith. They cannot understand everything, but they trust the Lord. Then at midnight, verse 29 to 30, the plague strikes. And here we have learned, and the lesson to learn is salvation comes through faith and obedience. The Israelites believed Moses' word, and therefore they are saved. And so salvation comes through believing and also obedience. Section 3, the Exodus begins. Pharaoh finally surrenders. The Israelites leave. And God brings them out after 430 years in Egypt, verse 37 to 40. And then verse 43 to 51, the Passover regulations were given to be observed annually to remind them. The lesson that we can learn here is that God's deliverance is complete and is on time, is timely. Okay. And then finally, God consecrating the firstborn, chapter 13, verse 1 to 16. God claims the firstborn. God then punished the firstborn of Egypt. God spared the firstborn. Now God claims that he owns the firstborn of the people of God. Then the feast of unleavened bread to remember, and the instructions given. Teach the children about God's salvation. The lesson is that we belong to God. We need to teach the next generation. Okay. Judgment, mercy, conclusion, death, life, bondage, freedom, the blood of the Lamb goes to the New Testament, points to the blood of Christ. Our true salvation is through the true Passover Lamb, and that is Jesus Christ. Okay. All right. Now let's look at the text. Okay, we ended last week, and basically Moses said to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh kind of wanted to negotiate and says that okay, and go worship the Lord, even go with your women, go with your children, but you must leave your flocks and herds behind. And Moses says, no, you must allow us to sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to the Lord our God. Our livestock too must go with us, not the hooves we left behind. We have to use them, some of them, for worship. Until we get there, we don't know what we have to use to worship the Lord. So the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. He was not willing to let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, get out of my sight. Make sure you don't appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die. Just as you say, Moses replied. Okay, then come to verse chapter 11. Now, chapter 11, verse 1 to 3 is kind of, it would seem that after verse 29, Moses left. Okay, not yet. See, and this is a kind of recall. Now the Lord has said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. It is interesting to note that the word plague here could also means blow or smite. This is the only time and first time event is used in the entire book of Exodus. And in all these plagues that they experienced at nine, they were considered signs and wonders and gods and signs upon Pharaoh. Now one more plague, one more smite. I will strike Pharaoh one more time. After that, he will let you go from here. And when he does, he will not only let you go, he will drive you out completely. So he will basically send you out. Now, tell the people and that men and women alike are to ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold. This goes back to chapter 3, and when God says, I will make the Egyptians favorable to be disposed to you, to these people. So when you leave, you will not go out empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in their house for articles of silver and gold, for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. Okay. Now then, it seems that the instruction is even expanded, not just on the women, but all the people. Tell the people, the men as well as the women, everybody, ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold. And going back to Exodus 3, the Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed to the people, towards the people, and Moses himself was highly regarded by Pharaoh's officials and by the people. Now go back to verse 29. Just as you said, I will never appear before you again. And before Moses left, he said, verse 4 is a direct continuation of verse 29 of chapter 10. So Moses said, then this is what the Lord says, about midnight, I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son of Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn son of the female slave who is on the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. And there will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites, not a dog will bark at any person or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. And all these officials of yours will come to me, bowing down before me, and say, go, 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 you and all the people who follow you. After that, I will leave. And then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. Okay? Now, so number of things here. Moses says to Pharaoh, at midnight, not about midnight, at midnight, what exact one? The Hebrew text, and I don't what at midnight, I will go throughout Egypt, every firstborn son. I've always read the NIV as a firstborn son. As I was preparing this, I began to read and go back to the Hebrew. The word firstborn son is actually simply firstborn. So the ESV, I think, translate more literally, every firstborn in the land of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, even to the firstborn of the slave girl, and the firstborn of the cattle. And all this while, I was always taught that God struck the firstborn son in Egypt. No, God struck the firstborn. And now, here, it's not just only the sons that were killed. Now, firstborn is more just become the first person, the first child, and sometimes the firstborn is also what we call not just what we call a chronological term, the first child. The firstborn is the one that the father considers as the one that will be the heir or the one who will take on the family line. And sometimes is the firstborn and his title is given to the second son or even the third son. And what happens if you don't have any sons? Then the daughter will inherit, and then the firstborn. And so if a family doesn't have any sons, now if the first child is probably a girl, second a girl, third a girl, the fourth child with a son will consider firstborn because it's a very patriarchal society. But what happens if the family had no sons? And then only girls and all children and all girls. Does it mean that this judgment on Egypt, that this family will be spared? No. Every firstborn will die. From firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn of the female slave. So from the very top to the bottom. And the firstborn of cattle as well will, and there will be a lot of wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has been ever before or would be again. But among the Israelites, not a dog will bark at any person or animal. Now, Jews don't keep dogs as pets. And there might be some evidence that pets and Egyptians like cats more than dogs, but they may have dogs, hunting dogs particularly. And but the dogs here are not pets or guard dogs in the house and barking, but they are the stray dogs. They are the wild dogs. And sometimes they are the nuisance. And in the middle of the night, they will fight, they will howl, they will create a nuisance. And but this verse says, among the Israelites, there will be so much peace, so much of it called in contrast to the wailing in Egypt, in the rest of Egypt, that not even a dog will bark at any animal or person. Then you will know that the Lord made a distinction between Egypt and Israel. And all these officials of yours, he doesn't mention the priest, and all these officials will come down bowing me, and they will say, go, go, you and all the people who follow you. After that, will leave. And then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. Okay, and Pharaoh says, you get out of my sight. Just as you say, I will never appear before you again. And Moses, hot with anger. First time. And in that episode, Moses was hot with anger, angry with Pharaoh. Now the Lord has said, Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in Egypt. And Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his country. Okay, so the final sign, which is the plague, the smiting, and the words basically to smite, to blow, to hit. All right, verse chapter 12, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, this month is to be for you the first month. The Israelites have a civil month that basically takes place, what we call Rosh Hashanah, and somewhere in September, October. And but now God says on this month, the month of Abib, somewhere in March, April, and this is to be your religious month. This will be the first month for your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a lamb, they must share with their nearest neighbor they haven't taken into account the number of people who are there. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed to in accordance to what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect. You may take it from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood, put it on the sides and the tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. On the same night, they are to eat the meat roasted over fire along with bitter herbs. Bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled with water, but roasted over fire with the head, legs, internal organs. Do not leave any of it until morning. Some of it, if some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked in your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste, for it is the Lord's Passover. So this is the instructions for the first Passover that was done in Egypt, and is to be done on the month, and what we call this is the month of Abib, and this month, and the first month, and later when they were in exile, the name of the month was changed to Nisan, and but Abib and Nisan is the same and same month. Okay, tell the whole community that on the 10th day of the month, and then take a lamb for his family. If a lamb is too small, must share the nearest, and according to get in account the number of people there are. Later on, then later Jewish determined that number of people for the Passover is 10, minimum 10, but that is not required here. Just basically make sure that you have enough lamb for everybody. Okay, you must determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance to each person would eat. Then the lamb must be year-old lambs. At least up to a year. And the English version says you must choose a year-old lamb. It's quite specific. But actually, Hebrew says any lamb that's up to 1 year old. And the idea is that it is something that not yet fully grown adult males and without defect. You may take it from the sheep or the goats, male ones. You have to take care of them until the 14th day of the month. And some people scratch their head, why 10 and 14? What is and the 6th? And one of my friends says, 10 is perfect, and 14 is sale, So say I'm going to share this with group here, but that's not what it is. There is some evidence that ancient Hebrews divide the month into 3 blocks of days, and 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, so about 30 days. And then there's also a lunar calendar, and that is the 14th is the what we call the middle of the month of the lunar year, and that 14th day will be the day of the full moon. And the full moon will provide what we call light for them to leave Egypt. And then it is basically you need that there full moon. There are no street lights. There are no what we call and you cannot just on the stars. You need the moon to provide what we call to know where they are going, so that they won't stumble, fall, things like that. So probably this is this 10 days and 14 days. So and also to choose 10 days, and then basically is for the elders, and we choose a land sufficient time to basically to examine the lambs that will be sufficient enough. Later on, that's what they do. And when you select and you have to take care of them. Then on the 14th day between at twilight. This twilight is a little bit ambiguous, and basically, the literal Greek, Hebrew, is let's see, I have it in, I think The Hebrew is between the two evenings. That is a kind of what between the two evenings is. And something that is between late afternoon to sunset, and some say is between sunset and exactly when the night falls, but anyway, it is between that time. Okay, they take some of the blood, put it on the sides and the tops, and then they are to eat. They are to eat the meat roasted over fire with the herbs, and bread made without yeast. Probably the very what we call primary reason for this is that you boil in water. That is a normal way of cooking, like a stew, things like that. You got to break the bones, and then it will take time to boil and cook, and then that would be true. So they have to roast it over fire. That is in haste. They have to eat bread without yeast. And you put yeast, you wait for it to rise and things like that. It will take a long time. So basically, the instructions given at this time is so that they will prepare their meals, their Passover meal, quickly and hastily. Okay, and do not leave anything of it in the morning. If some is left, you must burn it. Why? Because this is not an ordinary meal. This is a sacred meal. And a sacred meal, there are some regulations. Some might be tempted to what we call to keep some of for magical purposes. Things like no, you cannot do that. And this is a sacred meal. Everything has to be consumed, and then which is why sometimes and in church day that when they have communion, then the priest who conduct communion must drink all the wine, and all the bread must eat all the bread. You cannot leave them behind. You cannot leave anything. That is probably the reason behind that. And so this is a sacred meal. And so do not leave anything. You must burn it. If you then and you cannot throw it away. You must burn it so that you cannot be what we call desecrated, things like that. So this is how you have to eat it. With cloak tucked into your belt, sandals on your feet, and staff in your hand. So this last line gives you what we call the context. You have to eat it in haste. So this is do quickly. All right. On that same night, God says, I will pass over Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals. Okay. I will bring judgment on all the gods. I'm the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on your houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. Okay. And then for the instructions, this is a day you are to commemorate. Remember, this is something that you must remember for generations to come. You must celebrate this as a festival to the Lord, as a lasting ordinance. For 7 days, you are to eat bread made without yeast. Now, at that time, there's no yeast. And basically, the yeast I'm talking about is a fermented piece of bread that was left over from the previous dough. And they left it and ferment it. And so the fermentation allows that to be as a kind of a leavening and a kind of a yeast kind of thing to make it. So for 7 days, you are to eat unleavened bread that is made without yeast. In fact, on the first day, remove the yeast from your houses. For anyone who eats with the yeast from the first day until the 7th must be cut off from Israel. Now, the modern in Israel, those who are observant Jews and will have to do this as well. They must remove all the baking soda, the yeast, and all these things, and remove it from their houses. And all the shops and must remove it from the shops. And so what do they do? Actually, they have a very interesting way to do it, and so that there's no wasting. So then they develop some kind of a practical go around. So the rabbi will basically organize. Okay, so all the Jews will sell their yeast their yeast to a Gentile, say temporary, and the Gentile would take it for 7 days. And then after 7 days is over, they will buy it back without making any profit whatsoever. And then the government will consider all the government stores, and they will get all the yeast and sell it to a high Christian cleric and who will be in charge of buying all these things. And after 7 days is over, then this cleric will sell it back to the government to go back. So here is no wastage. Jews are very smart and don't wait to throw away everything, and it basically, and just imagine, you get a lot of yeast and things like that. These are not necessarily evil. So they eat yeast throughout the rest of the cold and the year. Then so bread, without yeast, is very flat and very hard to eat. So anyway, on the first day, remove the yeast from your houses. Anyone who eats yeast from the first day must be cut off. In those days, that'll be easier to do, but now, kind of a national kind of a thing is much more difficult. On the first day, hold a secret assembly, and neither on the seventh day do no work on these days except to prepare food for everyone to eat. This is what you do. So celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, because it's on this very day I brought out your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generation to come. In the first month, you are to eat bread without yeast from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st. For 7 days, no yeast is to be found in your houses. Anyone, whether foreigner or native born, who eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off, excommunicated, and deported from the community of Israel. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. Then Moses summoned all the elders and said to them, go at once and select the animals for your family, slaughter the Passover. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top and on the sides of the door frame. None of you shall go out of the door of your house until morning. Now, this seemingly is only practiced on the first day. This is the first time. Later on, they will go to the sanctuary to get the lamb slaughtered and things like that. And we have done that. They have to go back to the homes. And so then Jesus, when he ate the Passover, then remember, then he went out of the house and went to Garden of Gethsemane. So this instruction doesn't carry on to later generations. But on this day, because this day is the actual Passover, because and later on there's no people die, things like that. So and on the first Passover, when the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on top and the sides of the door frame and pass over that door. You will not, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Obey these instructions. When you enter the land, and as the Lord gave promise, you observe this ceremony. When your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? And then tell them this is the Passover sacrifice, and to the Lord will pass over the houses and the Israelites and spared our homes when they struck down Egyptians. Then the people bowed down and worshiped the Lord. The Israelites did just as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. So at midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who is in dungeon. Earlier, he said that he will strike down, and the firstborn of the son of Pharaoh and the firstborn of the female slave who is at his handmill. So from the highest to the lowest. And now it's even worse. Basically to the firstborn of the prisoner. The prisoner is even lower in status than the slave who is at work in a hin. So anyway, the firstborn of all the livestock and Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night. There was loud wailing, for there's not a house without someone dead. Everyone. So even, and this is one clue that some scholars says that even families without sons, only girls, only daughters, they also will have what we call someone who is struck down, the firstborn will be struck down as well. Okay. All right, and going back a little bit, they are to eat the lamb, they are to eat the meat roasted over fire with bitter herbs, bread without yeast. Do not eat the raw meat roasted fire with the leg, heads, and internal organs. Now, after the destruction of Jerusalem, okay, there is no more temple, because later on they find that to do the Passover, you must bring the lamb to the tabernacle, or the tabernacle, and there the priest. At this time, there was no priest because there was no priesthood yet. So all the elders have to do the slaughtering. So basically, then he says that then summon all the elders at once, select animals from your family, and slaughter the Passover. But later on, after we called, and after when they came to in Jerusalem, then they have to go to the temple, then and there the priests there will slaughter the animals, and they go home and prepare the Passover meal. After AD 70, when the temple was destroyed, there's no more sacrifice. There's no more what we call, then there are no priests. So what did they do? And there's no lamb and to what we call to slaughter. But what they do is that they do what we call a shank bone. It's the foreboned, the foreleg of the lamb, and is roasted. And there's a special name for it, zoroa, and that is placed in the center of the seder meal, and they don't eat it. Okay, it is not the whole lamb, and they is basically is to commemorate. And the idea is a lamb that was sacrificed, and then also to remind them that they cannot eat the actual Passover as instructed, because they have lost the temple, and they're looking forward when they can and celebrate the Passover completely. So in modern Israel today, they don't eat the lamb. There is no lamb to be eaten, and for the called the observant Jews, but they will have a lamb, roasted lamb, a leg of lamb, and that's put there, not a whole lamb, and as kind of a memorial, to so to speak, and that's how they do it now today. Okay. All right. So God struck, and the people, and so the Lord struck all the firstborn. Then during the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, and was Moses, Aaron, Pharaoh already said that I will not see you. Moses says, I will not see you. I will not meet you or see you again. Because the moment I see you, you will die. And probably his idea, there is no what we call indication that actually Aaron and was summoned, probably messenger was given to them, and Pharaoh, and there's no more discussion, there's no more negotiating, and summon Pharaoh, and get out, leave the people, you and your Israelites, go worship the Lord as requested, take your flock and herds, and as you go, as you say, go and also bless me. This is very interesting. When you go, bless me, and recognizing. So the Egyptians, not only Pharaoh, but the Egyptians all urge the people to hurry, leave. They are the reason why their firstborns are killed. And they are very dangerous people. They are dangerous in the community. So go, leave. Otherwise, we all die. So the people took the dough before the yeast was added. So no yeast, unleavened bread, and a dough unleavened, and carried on the shoulders with the kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed, and asked the Egyptians for articles, demanded, and so to speak, for articles of silver and gold and for clothing, because they need that, and there is a need for them to build a tabernacle, to do what we call the things they need, all this gold and silver. And these are like back pay, back wages for all the slavery that they have. So it's not borrowing, they are taking. And the Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed. They said, take, whatever you want, go. And they gave them whatever they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. Okay. The Israelites journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, beside women and children. Many other people went up with them, and also large droves of cattle, of livestock, both and flocks and herds. With the dough the Israelites brought with them, they baked loaves of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they were driven out of Egypt, did not have time to prepare food for themselves. 600,000 men, a lot of people. You count the women, another 600,000, and also 1.2 million with the children, almost 2 million people, maybe even 3 million people. And this has caused scholars to be very, very nervous. Very conservative, traditionalists and evangelicals, Bible believing, this is what the Bible says, historical evidence, whatever, it doesn't matter. I believe the Bible then over what his logic tells us. But some evangelical scholars, evangelical scholars, would think that, no, that is a little bit of a problem. 600,000. Now, the problem, and one way to look at it is that the word thousand here is the word aleph. Aleph can mean thousand, but aleph can also mean a clan, a group, a large clan. So some things that is possible is not 600,000, but 600 clans. Today, without the Hokkien clan, you have the Hakka clan, you have the different clans, and so there are 12 tribes. For the tribes, they have the sub tribes and subdivisions and all the different divisions, and so 600 clans, which is, and conservatively estimate, probably come up to about 30,000 people, and that maybe seems to be more manageable, but there's no agreement on this. So you want to believe 3 million people left, or 2 million people left, or maybe 300,000 people left. Okay. And so to have 3 million people in Goshen, and it's a little bit too what we call big a number, so to speak. Now, the length of time the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. And the Samaritan text says that the time that, and Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, says that the time that the people lived in Egypt and Canaan was 430 years. Okay. One of the problems is this, and in Genesis, and it says that, okay, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in the land of their own, and they'll be enslaved and mistreated there. So God told Abraham they will be there for 400 years. Now we are 430 years. So the Samaritan Pentateuch and the Septuagint try to then resolve this by saying that 430 years when they lived in Canaan, as well as in Egypt. So the 30 years is in Canaan. The other one is that, another way to look at it is that, now the 430 years, and this is also Paul using the Greek Bible. The law introduced 430 years later, and did not set aside the covenant periods previously. The other way to look at it is that some scholars think that, well, the 30 years that when they went down to Egypt were relatively happy years. and they didn't suffer with Joseph, with the prime minister and all that. So the 400 years is 400 years of suffering, and that's what God told Abraham. You will suffer 400 years in Egypt, but people will suffer 40 years in the so 430 years. So whatever it is, the thing is that about 430 years. This very day, the Lord's divisions left Egypt because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them up of Egypt. On this night, all the Israelites are to keep vigil, watch night, to honor the Lord for generations to come. Okay. Now, Passover restrictions. The Lord said to Moses, these are the regulations for the Passover meal. No foreigner may eat of it. Any slave you bought may eat of it after you circumcise him. But a temporary worker, resident, or a hired worker may not eat it. It must be eaten in the house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break the bones. Okay, the whole community of Israel must celebrate it. A foreigner resided among you who want to celebrate the Lord's Passover can, but he must have all the males in his house circumcised. In order, he must convert, so that he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat of it. The same law applies to the native born and to the foreigner to reside among you. So all the Israelites did as the Lord commanded Moses, and on that very day, the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt. One more thing to do. Okay, the last section. Consecration of the firstborn. The Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me every firstborn male. The first offspring of every womb among Israelites belong to me, both human and animal. The Lord said to the people, commemorate this day when you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery, because the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand. Eat nothing containing yeast today in the month of Aviv. So here we have the word Aviv here, and that you are living. When the Lord brings you to the land of Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and Jebusites, the land is swore to your ancestors to give you land flowing for money and honey. You are to observe this ceremony on this month, the month of Aviv. Later it's called month of Nisan. And for 7 days, eat bread without yeast. On the 7th day, hold a festival of the Lord. Eat unleavened bread during those 7 days. Nothing with yeast is to be seen among you, and yeast to be anywhere within the borders. Take it out. And on that day, tell your son, this I do. Tell us, I'm doing this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. This observation is for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead that this law is of the Lord is upon your lips. Now, this verse basically is to be taken symbolically. This observance will be like a sign on your hand, basically your actions, reminder on your forehead, your memory, and that this law is to be on your lips, something that you will repeat, you will say. Later, several hundred years later, the Jews take this literally, that they will, what we call, have tefillin, phylacteries, and they will have a little box, and where they put scriptures in it and tie around their hand, and then they will have a little box of scriptures and put in the box, and then they will put on their forehead. And this is taking this verse in the literal sense. This is repeated twice, then repeated again. This will be a sign for you on your hand and a symbol on your forehead. The Lord has brought it out with. But basically, if you are thinking of the context, the way it is, this observance, what observance? The observance of Passover, and is to be a sign for your, and on your hand. Basically, that means it's something that you, whatever actions you do, it is you have to remember is Passover. Whatever the things you have in mind, you must remember the Passover. So your actions and thoughts will always be remembered that this is what the Lord has done to you. This the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the point of time, year after year. When the Lord brings you out of the land and gives you to you as a promise, an oath to your ancestors, You are to give over to the Lord the first offspring of every womb, the first males of every livestock belong to the Lord, redeemed with the lamb, every firstborn. If you not redeem it, you break its neck. Redeem the firstborn among your sons. So your sons belong to God. Your lambs, your goats belong to God. The goats and the lambs and sheep, the cattle had to be slaughtered. Firstborn, sacrifice to the Lord. Children? No, you don't. You must redeem them. Every son you have, you redeem it with a lamb. Okay? And redeemed okay. But then, donkey. Donkey is considered unclean animal. Donkey, you cannot offer as a sacrifice. But donkeys are valuable. They are what we call they are burdens, beasts of burden or carrying burdens. You carry things, and they are your taxi, they are your Grab, they are your whatever, they are your transportation, things like that. And they don't mention camels, they don't mention other animals because these are pretty rare. But a donkey, everybody would have a donkey as kind of a to carry food and things like that, all the furniture, things like that. The donkey and had to be slaughtered. Then basically, but cannot, because it cannot be sacrificed as unclean. The donkeys are not clean animal. Okay, so every donkey you must redeem it with a lamb. But if you cannot redeem it, or if you don't redeem it, then you must break its neck. But you cannot sacrifice it. Okay, so there cannot be a sacrifice. You must kill it. So this is God spared the firstborn of Israel, and then so the firstborn belong to God, and they must honor God. So all the cattle, all the sheep, all the lamb must be offered as a sacrifice, and all the sons and firstborn son, they must be redeemed by offering a sacrifice. And it's a sacrifice, or I think, or payment and whatever. But the donkey must also be redeemed and things like that. I think the sons of redeemed pay a shekel. I think that's how many shekels, and you must buy back. You must redeem back, and you must redeem with the lamb, the donkey. All right. So so this is so in the days to come, when your son asks you what this means, you say to him, with a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed the firstborn of people and animals in Egypt. That's why I sacrifice to the Lord the firstborn, first meal offering of every womb. And that's why I redeem each of my firstborn sons. And this will be the sign on your hand and the symbol of your forehead. You'll remember this, you will do this, and a sign of your hand, symbol on your forehead, that the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Okay? And let's go back to the PowerPoint and to kind of recall back. Okay? So the night the God made the way. So then okay, let's see. Where am I? Okay. First, God told Moses that he's going to one last plague. Then Moses announced, God announced firstborn. Now, Moses didn't do anything. He didn't put a staff. He didn't do a but God says, this is what God will do. God himself will do it. And now the firstborn. Pharaoh didn't really believe it and chased Moses away. Already chased Moses away. And Moses didn't even get a chance for Pharaoh to respond. And because Moses and Pharaoh says, you get out of my sight. And Moses says, okay, you will never see me again. But before I go, this is what I'm going to tell you. God will kill your firstborn sons because you would not let my firstborn, God's firstborn, leave. All right? Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He doesn't believe. Then God instructs the people unblemished lamb, door on the door, blood on the doorpost, people obey. The plague strikes at midnight. Okay. Then now Pharaoh finally surrenders. The Israelites leave. God brings them out after 430 years. Then Moses gave them Passover regulations to carry out, to remember, and year after year. And then next one, God claims the firstborn. Then also the instruction for the Feast of Unleavened Bread to remember and teach your children about God's salvation. Okay. So the Exodus event is commemorated in two ways: the Passover meal, that is 1 day, 1 night, and then also the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. Okay, this is what they do. So so in the New Testament, you read the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and we belong to God and to teach next generation. Okay, all right. Okay, that's in time, 9 o'clock. Okay. Any questions, clarification, any observations, any need,
Pastor,
Yes.
the Pharaoh is usually the firstborn,
Mhm.
and the lineage is such. So why didn't the Pharaoh die as well?
I don't think the Pharaoh was the firstborn. That Pharaoh, and Ramesses wasn't the firstborn. He has an older brother who died. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay. But someone asked question, Pharaoh is a problem. So why don't God kill Pharaoh instead of all the other people? A good question. But I think Pharaoh need to learn. Pharaoh represents the entire, and he has to see. Sometimes killing the Pharaoh will be a less effective object lesson than to see his actions, his stubbornness, and God says, "I will do all these wonders and all these things so that you will know that I am God, not your puny Egyptian gods, but I am really the God." Okay. And he's of Pharaoh. And okay. Incidentally, this Pharaoh didn't die, and for a long time. Later on, we read Pharaoh's chariots and chased the Egyptians, chased the Israelites into the Dead Sea, and they're all drowned. And if our identification of Pharaoh is correct, this Pharaoh lived for a long time. He didn't die that time. Okay. And his army drowned, but he himself did not. I think was Pharaoh for almost 50 years. Okay. All right. Any other question?
There were no records as to what happened since the
No records.
Jews left.
Yeah.
The slaves left.
Yeah.
So if you have lived with all these slaves,
Mm.
how many 100,000 or million, and suddenly they all left, who's going to do the work?
The people, there were other people. They are not the only slaves. Many of the other people also left, and there were other people who left as well, and not everyone left, but there are people who would. Now, then, critics will say there's no record in the Egyptian record story. This is something that in kind of what we call national shame, national humiliation that you don't record down, and is like Donald Trump, Epstein files, release it. No, 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 cannot release because so certain things are covered up. So and maybe one of these days we will find some and hidden records and that was kept in some archival material that was kept out of sight for posterity. Then these things like that. So far, there is no Egyptian record of what we call the Exodus outside the Bible. Okay. All right. Okay, there are what we call scholars and Christian scholars who are more liberal or more critical and would say the Exodus story is a nice story, but never really happened. And the nation of Israel and it kind of grew more evolutionary rather than that kind of major catastrophe, major kind of a thing. And this story was made up to explain how they became a people, and it was a nice story that grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, if you do not believe the Bible, that's what you believe. No?
If that's the case, then there was no ending to the Exodus where the God sent people in. His sent his people in to take over the land.
The critics and what we call the liberal scholars says that, and the Jewish people then basically became a people through a long time of overcoming and the native people, the Philistines and all that, and became and come by what we call confederacy. There is no Joseph, there is no Jacob, there is no Abraham, there is no Moses, and there's no nothing. It basically organically became a people, and then they need some story, some background story, some mythological story to justify the existence, to glorify the existence, and um, they all say basically saying that this is what happened in 1948 when modern Israelis tell about story of God's miracle, things like that, and God delivered them from the Egyptians, God delivered from the Syrians, God delivered from the Arab enemies, and the Jews were a very small community, and that's a miracle. So the birth of Israel, modern Israel, is a miracle. It's like that. So that kind of a story is projected back. In modern Israel, you find that the true picture is much more complicated, and there were all. If you look at what we call, but you talk to a Jew, modern Jew today, who believes in what we call the historical kind of a miraculous rebirth of the nation, they will tell you this story. But the historians will tell you a different story. There were continual fightings, there were kind of things like that, and there was horrific and actions on both sides and things like that. And the British were involved, these other things were involved, and so then so that can, so and these critical scholars will say that there is no Exodus, there is no crossing Red Sea, there's no basically there was various group of people called Habirut, and basically they found common cause together, and they served God Yahweh and become, and they also serve other gods particularly, and so they're all kind of problem until and coming down to the Babylon exile, they serve the one true God. And so that's evolution of religion. Okay? Most evangelical scholars will say, no, no, no. I think that is to say that the Bible is not inspired by God, it's not true, it's not historical, it's not to be trusted. One of the things of the past is that it's very, very difficult to reconstruct from records and from what we call and exactly from what we call archaeological findings, the history. So you either have to trust the historical records that carried by the people and okay.
In Israel, this Passover festival, do they still practice it?
Yeah.
Like put blood on the door?
No. See, they don't put the blood on the door. Mio asked there are many things in the original Passover. The first Passover is not carried on because there is no angel of death and the Passover. They just basically and do the meal and the eating of the what we call unleavened bread. Then they basically keep the 7 days without work, and there is no putting blood on the doorway, things like that. And nobody do that anymore. They don't even sacrifice a lamb anymore because the lamb has been sacrificed by the priest, and no more priest. There's no more temple, so they cannot do that. So they cook, they roast a leg of lamb and put it there as a kind of just as Jesus was crucified on the tree, and we don't have a tree where we have a crucifix and all that. So what we have a Christmas tree. So like that, lor. The Christians, things like that. All right. Okay. Any other questions?
Pastor, they say, I mean, excuse me, the people are to stay in their homes. So what about the animals? Where do they store them?
Oh, in those days, all the animals stay in the house.
Inside their house?
In the house.
Oh, so they are also covered now.
The Jews don't have, they are slaves. Slaves, you don't have 10, 100 cattle, then 100 sheep, then you will have 1 lamb, 2 lambs, and they are poor people. Okay, there are no rich people there are no rich Israelites in Egypt. They're all slaves, and so in a house, in a typical house which is very small. If you think Hong Kong is small, probably this house is even smaller than Hong Kong and apartments. And so all the people then will sleep in one side of the room, which is elevated. And then on the lower side of the house, there are the animals. There's 1 sheep, 1 goat. And most people don't have cows. Cows is expensive. And so they don't drink cow's milk, they drink goat's milk and things like that. So then only rich people will have cattle, will have cows. Later on, when they go into the land and people get prosperous, but it's unlikely that any of they may have 1 or 2, maybe as a community bullock or something like that, and maybe 10 families will have 1 cow, something like that, or 2 cows. Probably they don't have. They're sheep herders largely, so they will have, and maybe even some of the children will sleep with the lamb and in their and as a kind of some cats sleep with us, some dogs sleep with us. They don't have cats, they don't have dogs, so they will have sheep. And remember the parable that Nathan told David, as this poor man has a sheep that he treats like a daughter, and so that kind of a thing. So they all stay in the house. Oh, the Egyptians will have cattle, livestock, things like that, but not the Jewish people. not the Israel, not the Israelites. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Pastor.
Right. These are slaves. These are poor people. These are oppressed people. These are people who have to work for the government and beaten by the government. And they are not businessmen. They are not housekeepers. They're not shopkeepers. They are not accountants. They're all laborers working and building and pharaohs and storehouses.
Pastor,
Yes.
I attended a Passover meal
Say that.
conducted here.
Yeah.
Okay. They were actually like they have wine, 4 cups of wine, and one of which they say is Elijah's cup.
Yeah.
And each meal they say represents something.
Yeah.
Right. And what does Elijah's cup represent? Is it the coming of Christ?
The coming of Elijah.
Coming of Elijah.
They believe Elijah will come before the Messiah returns.
I see. And the coming of Elijah, what does it, does it have any significance with Christ?
The Jews don't believe in Christ.
No, for us.
For us,
At this time.
why are we doing the Seder meal? Why are we doing that? The meal that we should be doing is the communion meal, not the Seder meal. We are not Jews. We are Christians.
Okay. But, they actually taught us about this Passover meal.
Yeah.
And explaining each meal, each part of the meal, what does it represent, like that's something like that.
Okay. So why are we Christians becoming Jewish?
But don't you think it's good to know?
Yeah, it's good to know, but are we doing it?
I think whoever invited them to that Passover should question them instead.
I understand. So sometimes we want to find Jewish roots and things like that, and I have no problem with Jewish Christians keeping the Passover. Okay, and because they are Jews, but the fulfillment of Passover is in Christ. So the type has been fulfilled in Christ, and Christ changed the Passover into the communion meal, and that is with the communion meal. See, and put this way, and you were driving what we call a Conchil. Someone gave you a Mercedes. Why are you still driving a Conchil? You should be driving a Mercedes, right?
Conchil easy to park, man.
Easy to park, okay. But value, and things like that. So, and something has been fulfilled, and now, and yeah, there are Christians sometimes. One of the problems I think that I got no. I'm not saying that they're not doing anything wrong. They are okay, but probably what you have is that Pentecostal Christians, evangelical Christians, and because of a lack of symbols, rejected much of the symbols of the church because they're Catholic, they are Reformed, they are Lutheran, things like that. We reject all these other what we call Christian traditions, but because we don't have any other traditions, so we'll try to get some kind of traditional thing, and they go back to the Bibles and use Old Testament traditions, which, yeah, I think that if you want to do a Seder meal as a kind of object lesson to understand, just as we study today, and the what we call the Exodus as a lesson, and that's fine. But to do it on a regular basis and things like that, I sometimes wonder whether our vision is correct or not. Okay, and we are Chinese. We have Chinese customs. We have Chinese traditions. Let's honor our Chinese heritage by converting those traditions that we have and give them symbolic Christian meaning. That would be much better because we are Chinese and or Indians and things like that. So culture and faith is something. Why are you Chinese people trying to be Jewish? You are Christians. And so Paul particularly say, why are you asking these Greeks to get circumcised and to keep food laws? So there are some Christians that said they don't eat pork, they don't eat shrimp, kosher meals. And kosher is even more stricter than halal. Say in halal, you don't eat pork, but you eat shrimp and you eat seafood. But in what we call in the Jewish dietary, you cannot eat shrimp. You cannot eat what we call meat, pork. You cannot eat meat with dairy products. So if you go to Israel, in the morning they will serve you milk and bread and butter. They will serve you fish, but they will never serve you meat, beef, or lamb. You cannot, because that is not kosher. In the night, when you eat meat, fish, whatever you have, you cannot have milk. Because it's not allowed. That is keeping Jewish dietary laws. But we are not Jews. We're not required to keep those laws, those regulations. Okay, those laws and regulations do have meaning, yes. But all this meaning has what we call fulfilled in Christ. You want to find the meaning? Find it in Christ. Christ is the full meaning for us. Okay. Patricia, you understand what I'm saying? Yes.
Yes, Pastor, I understand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Pastor,
Kamwa.
does it mean that the Passover are for the Jews? We are not Jews.
They're not
So
Jews.
theoretically, we should not participate in the Passover.
Oh, no, it's not saying. Are you saying that Jews cannot celebrate Chinese New Year? Can, or do you want to check? So are they required to celebrate Chinese New Year? No lah. If they want to. So can we celebrate the Passover? Sure, we can celebrate the Passover. So if you go to Israel, you have a Jewish friend and they invite you to the Passover. Yeah, you're going to join in. This is the Passover. Then we have a better understanding because we are still stuck in the Passover. For us, the Passover points to Christ. We might even use the Passover to say that this Passover actually, as a Christian, help me point to Christ. Now, if you do that, you might cause what we call a big argument, lah. And so probably keep silent. Don't do that because Jews are very, very sensitive about because they believe in the Passover without reference to Christ. So the Passover does not point to Christ and point to Jesus, but Jesus basically the Passover points to him. So then, so if a Jewish couple, a Jewish family, then in Israel invite you to go and Passover, you go ahead. There's nothing wrong. Just as then someone invite you to Pavali meal or the Chinese New. If you are a foreigner, you can invite to come to Chinese New Year reunion dinner. Say cultural things can be done. So are we required to do it? No, we are not required to do it. That's the difference. And so sometimes church use what we call a Passover as a teaching lesson to teach what we call Jewish kind of things. And but remember, the Passover that is done in modern Israel is not exactly the same thing that's done in the Bible. Okay, and I'm not too sure that you go to Seder meal, then it has what we call developed certain things. So each part represents certain things and all that. And of course, you can Christianize it, okay? And everybody can read into it. We went for a dinner, a Chinese dinner at Penang and Baptist, and so every Chinese dish, and they have what we call a devotional thought attached to it. The fish represent this lah, the this one represent this lah. In Chinese, it was all done in Chinese, and the Chinese have a way of have certain words to pronounce over it, things like that. So every 10-course dinner, every meal represents something for a Christian. Say, Lord, and we can use a lot of things then to represent and truths, and there's nothing wrong with it, and so natural things, normal things, and but they just say that this is what it actually means. Not necessary. It may, okay, this Seder meals that they have reminds them, say, so, and I can't remember all the various elements of the Seder meal. Certain talks about this represents the bitterness, the sourness, the sweetness, the things like that. So you become, it kind of devotional, spiritualizing kind of thing, not taught in the Bible. Okay. Later we find, for example, the word leaven, and later on the word leaven basically then become a corrupting influence. Okay, and leaven basically as a symbol for sin. But the reason why they did not have leaven in the Exodus, because leaven takes time. When you bake a bread with leaven, it takes time for the bread to rise. When you boil and the what we call the meat, it takes time to boil. But when you roast it, unleavened bread, you do it hastily, so you can eat it in haste. The point is that they got to be prepared to leave quickly, because that is the Lord's deliverance. That is the original significance of that. Later on, they will and talks about and all kinds of things that and you don't break the bones, things like that, and so Jesus was not broken, things like that. But when you roast, you don't need to break bones and all things. You roast the whole thing whole. So basically, the idea is that whole. When you boil, you have to break the bones and put it all, and so you can't boil the whole thing together because the pot won't enough. But if you roast the lamb over the pit fire, and it can be done as a whole. So that kind of much more practical kind of a situation, and in that sense. So but be very careful not to. There are what we call truths that we have, but sometimes we read truths into ceremonies. I think that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then it might work for you, but not work for someone else, and someone else doesn't see it. And it's the abstract art. What to put it? You say, "Oh, do you see? I see this as a." I don't see anything. I just see just some colors and things like that. So you have to be careful with and. It's interesting that it is a charismatic Pentecostal that try to all these Jewish observances. When Catholics and Anglicans and Lutherans did not have to resort to them because they have their festivals and traditions that speak of what we call Christian, what we call and meaning, and so I find sometimes I don't know what I would say. We don't celebrate Christmas, but we celebrate the Passover. We don't celebrate and Maundy Thursday or Ash Wednesday, but we and do the Day of Atonement. We do. These are Jewish stuff. These are not stuff for us. As I said, nothing wrong with it. We can learn something out of it. But if you're in Sabah and Sarawak, celebrate Gawai, the Harvest Festival. Christianize it. Things like that. Okay.
Pastor.
Yeah.
Pastor, I understand what you were saying. It's basically after Paul released all these rules from being held by the Jews, like you don't need to be circumcised and all that. So the Christians suddenly had no more ritualistic rites for them to follow. So it's like quite empty. That's why they fall back on the Jewish practices, because then it brings some ritualistic. Humans are ritualistic. They wanted some ritualistic functions. Maybe that's why. The other thing is about the unleavened bread. I may be a bit confused earlier, and I'm still probably am. If I understand what unleavened is, because of the hastiness of leaving, they cannot wait for the development of the bread. But then after that, they have these things about having the unleavened bread in the process for 7 days, 6 days. That is time.
Is to remember.
Where does that apply? I think I'm confused over that part.
Basically, is to remember that they have to eat unleavened bread. So basically, during that time, then they is impressed upon them that they eat and the suffering that they had, and sacrifices, and later on, some sacrifices you cannot use leaven, but there are other sacrifices that you need leaven. So it is not altogether then leaven is not necessarily evil. Jesus used leaven as what we call example for growth. And so leaven can also be an example for sin. And get out the old leaven and be purified. So bread should be bread, unleavened bread, things like that. So later become unleavened bread is simplicity, purity, things like that. But they come later and read into it by later Jews and things like that. So definitely, and yes, they ate unleavened bread, so they remember unleavened bread for 7 days. The Passover, and which put it practically, and if I want to put it what we call, you can't eat lamb for 7 days. You can't eat a Passover for 7 days. It's like eating Chinese New Year for 7 days. And you can't do that. That is too much. But you can eat unleavened bread for 7 days. You can observe that for 7 days. Once a year, you remember that it is with unleavened bread that we experience the Passover, the deliverance of Exodus. So this is much easier to do on what we call a lengthy period, and to have a Passover Seder meal for 7 days continuously is a little bit too much. That and because that means you have to get a whole lamb, and 7 days you have 7 lambs. Cannot law. Tak boleh law, not practical law. But unleavened bread.
Yeah.
You get or not? You get one?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely correct. It's just that that's the remembrance.
Remembrance.
Yeah. By the way, isn't what is the Indian bread? Chapati, is it?
I'm not too sure the chapati. Chapati got yeast one.
Got me? It's very flat way. It doesn't grow up.
Got no yeast. That's very flat. Yeah. So then, but I need to what we call then comment on what you said. when the Jews basically then separate from Christians, the Christians got nothing going back to Jewish, try to find no, that's not true. In fact, in the early years, the Jews made a very, very determined effort to make themselves different from the Jews. So because the Jews use unleavened bread, the Christians for communion use leavened bread.
I thought the element we take for communion is actually unleavened.
Oh no, the early Christians then they become a big problem. And some say that we should use unleavened bread or to leavened bread, and they become a big what we call debate in the probably third, fourth century, things like that. To use unleavened bread, to use unleavened bread. The Jews and what we call fast on I think Monday and Thursdays. Christians say we don't fast on Monday and Thursdays. We fast on Wednesday and Fridays. Okay, they make the early Christians and later they try very hard to make sure that the practice that they have is not seen as Jewish. After 1900 years, 2000 years, when this necessary what we call no one can mistaken what's a Jew and what is a Christian. We find that there's no necessity to try to make ourselves different. In fact, we try to find our commonality. We are coming to try to find some common ground in that. And some of it maybe some of the Americans who did what we call Jewish Seder meals and do it as a kind of what we call evangelistic outreach to the Jewish people. They want to make that Christians are not antagonistic to the Jews, so they will have a Seder meal. They have this, so the Jews to show the Jews that they are not antagonists to them particularly, and that is in America, all right. In Malaysia, there are no Jews here, lah. Who are you trying to evangelize?
Yeah, you're right.
Who are you trying to make connection? Okay. Now, there are a number of pastors I know, and there's one pastor particularly, during Ramadan, he fasts. Okay. He fasts during Ramadan to show connection with the Muslims. Because fast, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong to fast. So he basically fasts with the Malays to show the kind of identification. Not that I'm not saying that you all should do that, but this is one pastor. He's not the only one who does that, and particularly, especially if a Christian live in a Malay and community and majority community in a kampong, things like that, it might be good for them to fast together with the Muslims. But we don't fast because we are Muslim. We fast because we want to show our identification with them. So in that sense, but why are you doing Jewish things? Because there's no Jews in Malaysia. And the last Jewish people are in Penang. There is a Jewish cemetery in Penang. You should go and see. And I have a little book talk about the last Jew in Penang. Very nice little book written by a Malay, and a children's book. A lot of pictures. Not cheap. I think we paid 30 ringgit for it.
Pastor, I wonder those who want to practice Jewish customs in Malaysia, don't know whether they actually circumcise themselves or not.
They do. They even can follow the Jewish calendar instead of Chinese calendar. Okay.
Is the Jewish calendar the timing of the Exodus where they say the first day you leave is the day one of your calendar?
Sure. I think no. Maybe not. Maybe it is. I need to. But they follow the Jewish calendar. Maybe it is going back to the Exodus and circumcised. I'm circumcised, but not because I have a medical condition. The doctor recommended I should have circumcision. So I'm a Jewish Christian now, or Muslim Christian.
Yeah. No, of course it's healthy actually.
And but I'm not doing. I didn't do it because of to be healthy. I do it because I had a condition and that my doctor, my urologist says that I should circumcise. So I had to circumcise
Fine.
last year. It's
Yeah,
last year.
yeah, it's good for you.
Mm.
Great. It's not religious. It is medically
Yeah.
required.
Yeah. You have my insurance had to pay for it, and my doctor have to and show and give evidence that it is a medical necessity for me to do it, because
Great.
circumcision is elective. It's not it's not what we call and necessary, and so insurance won't pay for you if you have elective circumcision. But my circumcision is covered by my insurance, and because it was a medical condition, so doctors have to do of the circumcision. They have to do the biopsy and send for biopsy, and so this is a condition that I need that. Okay, interesting. Okay, all right. Okay. Albert, William, right today.
No questions, Master.
All right, next week we will have one more session, and then the following week, I think, then I would not, then we don't have it because I'm getting ready for my birthday. All right,
Yeah, happy birthday.
so a lot of things to do. Yeah. So next week we will come back, and the next week will be the 23rd, I think. Okay. All right. If no other questions. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Pastor.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
God bless everybody.